Dwarfs, he scoffed, setting the device down. We're calling them that because of their size? How quaint. Standing at the far end of the chamber, Admiral Seelan Kor folded his arms. Kor, a man with a stern demeanor and streaks of silver in his close-cropped hair, was known for his pragmatism. Yet even he couldn't suppress a smirk. They've entered our space with what amounts to a ragtag flotilla, Kor said. Do they really think their puny ships can stand against the might of the Empire? This will be over before dinner. The council erupted in laughter. For years, the Empire had subjugated species of all kinds, towering beasts with claws that could rend steel, insectoid swarms with numbers that darkened skies, and even ethereal beings whose very existence defied physics. What threat could a diminutive race in outdated vessels possibly pose? Still, Wayne said, raising a hand to silence the room, protocol demands we investigate. Let's not waste more resources than necessary. Dispatch a single destroyer to handle this misunderstanding. At the center of the room, Fleet Intelligence Officer Ren Halleck cleared his throat. Younger and less seasoned than the others, Halleck's nervous energy was palpable. High Commander, the data suggests something unusual about this fleet. Their movements are highly coordinated, almost surgical. This doesn't align with the profile of a primitive species. Wayne waved him off with a dismissive gesture. Unusual? A child with a slingshot is unusual. Are you suggesting these dwarfs are anything more than a nuisance? Halleck hesitated, then shook his head. No, sir, but nothing. Wayne cut in. The Empire thrives because we do not waste time fearing ants beneath our boots. You'll learn that soon enough. The so-called dwarf fleet appeared in Terrace's orbit within standard hours of the report. Their ships were small, angular, and lacked the imposing elegance of Imperial design. Imperial officers stationed on the colony gathered in the observation deck of the Central Command Tower, sipping wine and wagering on how quickly the battle would be over. Look at them, sneered Colonel Aaron Tash, a burly officer with a scar bisecting his left eyebrow. He gestured toward the viewport, where the enemy fleet hovered like gnats around the colony's defense grid. They probably cobbled those ships together from scrap. I doubt they've even heard of plasma shielding. Major Cal Ren, younger and more analytical, squinted at the holographic display. They're holding formation, he said, his tone uncertain. Tighter than I'd expect for a scavenger fleet. Tash laughed, clapping Run on the back. Relax, Major. You'll see. Discipline means nothing when you lack firepower. Below them, the Empire's destroyer Imperious Wrath loomed like a metal predator. The ship's captain, a grizzled veteran named Loren Kren, activated the ship's intercom. To the enemy fleet, he intoned, his voice filled with disdain. You are trespassing in Imperial space. Surrender immediately or face annihilation. The response came moments later, broadcast across all channels. It was a calm, measured voice, unmistakably male but with an accent unfamiliar to the Imperial officers. We will not surrender. Your aggression is unwarranted, but if you choose violence, we will respond in kind. Respond in kind? Kren repeated, laughter bubbling up from his bridge crew. Who do these insects think they are? The order to fire was given without hesitation. A barrage of plasma bolts streaked through space, lighting up the void as they arced toward the dwarf fleet. Yet, to the surprise of the Imperial officers watching from the colony, the enemy ships moved with astonishing precision. Each bolt missed by mere meters as the smaller vessels darted and weaved, their maneuvers so sharp they seemed to defy inertia. How? Kren muttered, watching the display in disbelief. Before he could complete the thought, the dwarfs retaliated. Their ships, though smaller, carried weapons of startling accuracy. In seconds, the Imperious Wrath's shields flared and faltered under a concentrated assault. A well-placed torpedo struck the destroyer's aft engines, sending a ripple of explosions through its hull. On the observation deck, Tasha's wine glass shattered as it slipped from his grasp. Impossible, he whispered. Ren's eyes were glued to the viewport. They've neutralized the Wrath, he said, his voice trembling. One volley, and it's over. The realization spread like a chill through the room. These were no scavengers. As the dwarf fleet maintained its position, a single transmission was sent to the colony. The same calm voice spoke, but this time, there was an edge to it. We have demonstrated restraint. Do not test us further. In the Imperial Citadel on Luxor Prime, the transmission played before the Emperor's Council. For the first time in decades, silence hung in the chamber. Wayne's face darkened as he replayed the message, his earlier bravado replaced by a cold determination. They caught us off guard, Kor said, finally breaking the silence. It won't happen again. Off guard, Halleck interjected, his earlier nervousness replaced with urgency. This wasn't luck, Admiral. These dwarfs, whoever they are, outmaneuvered us. If we assume they're weak because of their size, we're making a fatal mistake. Wayne stood, his imposing opposing frame casting a long shadow. "Prepare the fleet," he commanded. "If they think a single victory means they can challenge the Empire, they'll soon learn otherwise. We will show them what true power looks like." As the council dispersed, Halleck lingered, staring at the hollow display of the dwarf fleet. Something about them nagged at him, a question that refused to be silenced. Who are they? The stage was set. The Empire, blinded by arrogance, was marching toward a conflict it did not yet understand. The dwarfs had revealed their strength, but their true identity remained shrouded in mystery, an enigma that would soon upend everything the Empire believed about itself and its place in the galaxy. The Imperious Wrath's smoldering wreckage cast an eerie glow over Terrace's atmosphere, a silent testament to the dwarf's prowess. On the observation deck, the Empire's officers stared in stunned silence at the tactical display. The dwarf fleet remained in formation, motionless yet poised like predators assessing their prey. Major Calrin broke the silence. "They didn't press the attack," he said, his voice laced with unease. "Why hold back when they had the advantage?" Colonel Aaron Tash, red-faced and seething, slammed a fist against the console. "Cowards," he growled. "They're trying to bait us, make us think they're stronger than they are." Wren shot him a skeptical glance. "That wasn't luck, Colonel. Their coordination, their weaponry, it's leagues ahead of what we assumed." Before Tash could retort, a comms officer interrupted. "Incoming transmission from the enemy fleet." The observation deck tensed as the hollow projector flickered to life, revealing a figure clad in sleek black armor with a visor obscuring his face. His build was compact but imposing, his posture radiating confidence. "This is Commander Darren of the Human Sovereignty Defense Corps," the figure announced, his voice calm and deliberate. "Your unprovoked attack has been neutralized. We have no desire for further bloodshed, but we will defend ourselves if necessary. Withdraw your forces and leave the system now." Tash snorted. "Humans? Impossible. They must be lying." But Wren wasn't so sure. There was something unsettlingly familiar about the way the commander spoke, the measured cadence of his words. High above the planet, aboard the Imperial Dreadnought Invincible Hand, Admiral Seelencourt observed the exchange through a secure feed. The calm authority in Commander Darren's voice grated against Corps' pride. For centuries, humanity had been dismissed by the Empire as a scattered, insignificant species, one that had been left to toil on fringe worlds under the Empire's shadow. Yet here they were, standing defiant, wielding technology that rivaled Imperial engineering. Corps' jaw tightened. "Open a channel," he ordered. Moments later, his image replaced Darren on the hollow projector. "This is Admiral Seelencourt of the Galactic Empire," he said, his tone dripping with disdain. "Your theatrics are noted, but let me be clear. You are outmatched and outnumbered. If you surrender now, I might consider leniency. Refuse, and I promise you will regret it." Darren tilted his head slightly, as though studying Core. When he spoke, his tone was unshaken. "It's curious how those who hold power often confuse it with wisdom. We do not seek war, Admiral, but we will not yield to bullies. You have 30 minutes to decide." Core's face darkened. "You dare issue ultimatums to the Empire? Your arrogance will be your undoing." He cut the transmission with a swipe, seething. Back on Terrace, the mood in the command center had shifted. Tash tried to maintain his bravado, but even he couldn't ignore the unease rippling through the ranks. "They're bluffing," he insisted. "They got lucky against the Wrath. We've seen this before. Scrappy little upstarts who think one victory makes them invincible." Wren turned to him, his voice sharp. "Colonel, with respect, this isn't like anything we've seen before. Their tactics, their technology, it's deliberate. They've been preparing for this." Tash dismissed him with a wave. "And we've been crushing civilizations since before their species learned to harness fire. I don't care if they call themselves human, dwarf, or demigod. They'll fall, just like the rest." Above the colony, the Empire's response was swift. Core ordered the deployment of 3 additional destroyers from the fleet, a calculated show of force meant to intimidate. The ships formed a defensive ring around the planet, their weapons primed and targeting systems locked on the dwarf fleet. "This ends now," Core declared, his voice echoing through the bridge. "No more games." The dwarfs responded immediately. Their fleet split into smaller units, each maneuvering with surgical precision. Unlike the Empire's destroyers, which relied on brute strength and overwhelming firepower, the dwarfs fought with elegance and efficiency. Their ships darted between the massive Imperial vessels, exploiting weak points with pinpoint accuracy. On the ground, Ryon and Tash watched in growing disbelief as the battle unfolded. "They're dismantling us," Ryan said quietly. "They're pests," Tash snapped. "A nuisance at best. Once we overwhelm their numbers." "Colonel," Wren interrupted, his voice rising. "Look again. This isn't just strategy, it's knowledge. They know our fleet's weaknesses. They've studied us." Tash opened his mouth to argue, but a sudden sudden explosion on the tactical display silenced him. One of the destroyers erupted in flames, its debris scattering across the void. Inside the Imperial command ship, Kor clenched his fists. How? He muttered. How are they doing this? Halleck's voice came through on a private channel, his tone urgent. Admiral, I've been analyzing the enemy's movements. Their tactics, they're not random. It's as though they're playing a game of chess while we're swinging clubs. Kor scowled. Then we adapt. I want every available ship deployed. No more holding back. Halleck hesitated. With respect, Admiral, we can't win this with sheer numbers. They're smaller, yes, but their technology is at least equal to ours. We need to understand their origins, what drives them. Kor's patience snapped. What drives them is irrelevant. What matters is that we crush them before they become a greater threat. Back on the observation deck, Rin stared at the enemy fleet, a growing sense of dread gnawing at him. They're human, he murmured, more to himself than to anyone else. Tash turned to him, his expression incredulous. What did you say? They're human, Rin repeated, louder this time. Not just in name, but in how they think, how they fight. They're using tactics that only humans would understand. Adaptation, precision, exploiting every flaw. Tash shook his head. Even if that's true, it doesn't matter. Humans are nothing but a scattered species of backwater primitives. They don't have the resources to challenge the Empire. Not primitives, Rin said firmly. Not anymore. As the battle continued, the dwarfs held their ground, each exchange chipping away at the Empire's confidence. It was clear they were fighting with purpose, not out of desperation, but with calculated resolve. The dwarfs' commander sent one final transmission to the Imperial fleet. This is your last chance. Leave the system, or you will leave us no choice but to escalate. Kor's pride refused to let him yield, even as cracks formed in the Empire's facade of invincibility. Escalate all you like, Kor growled, his voice a low snarl. Let's see if your resolve matches ours. But deep in the hearts of the Empire's officers, doubt had taken root. For the first time, the Galactic Empire's arrogance seemed less like strength and more like a fatal weakness. The dwarfs, humans, were far from defeated, and the battle was far from over. The void between the Imperial fleet and the dwarfs' armada erupted into a violent ballet of light and destruction. Beams of plasma and kinetic projectiles crisscrossed the expanse, illuminating the darkness in bursts of fiery brilliance. The dwarfs moved with unnerving precision, their smaller ships darting between the lumbering Imperial destroyers like wasps tormenting a bear. Admiral Seelan Kor stood rigid on the bridge of the invincible hand, his knuckles white as he gripped the rail. Each explosion that rocked his fleet sent a ripple of rage through his chest. Status report, he barked. A junior officer stammered, his eyes wide. Destroyer Sovereign Blade has been disabled, sir. The Crimson Veil is reporting critical hull breaches. And enough, Kor snapped, cutting him off. He turned to his tactical officer, Lieutenant Oren Malik, a steady hand amidst the chaos. Malik, what's their weakness? Every enemy has one. Malik frowned, his fingers dancing across the holographic interface. They're incredibly efficient, Admiral. Each maneuver maximizes their firepower while minimizing exposure. It's as if they've anticipated our every move. He hesitated, then added, it's almost human. Kor slammed a fist against the console. I don't care what they are. Find me a way to break them. Inside the lead dwarf ship, Commander Darren observed the battle with a cool detachment. Around him, his crew moved with the precision of a well-oiled machine, their expressions calm despite the stakes. Imperial destroyer cluster shifting to wedge formation, reported Lieutenant Carver, his voice steady. They're trying to flank us. Darren studied the tactical display, his brow furrowed in thought. Deploy Squadron 3 to the rear, he ordered. Cut their supply line before they complete the maneuver. Carver nodded. Understood, Commander. The dwarf ships broke formation, their movement seemingly chaotic but perfectly synchronized. Within moments, the Imperial flank collapsed, their supply ships reduced to smoldering wreckage. Darren allowed himself a brief smile. They're learning, he murmured, but too slowly. Keep up the pressure. On the surface of Terrace, Major Cal Ren watched the battle unfold from the colony's observation deck. Each Imperial defeat deepened his unease. They're dismantling us, he said quietly, his eyes fixed on the tactical display. One precise strike at a time. Colonel Aaron Tash paced behind him, his face a mask of frustration. We've faced worse, he growled. Once the Admiral brings in the full fleet, they'll crumble. Ren shook his head. That's the problem, Colonel. They're not fighting fighting like an enemy trying to survive. They're fighting like an equal, like they've done this before. Before Tash could respond, the deck shuddered as an explosion rippled through the colony's outer defenses. Alarm klaxons blared, and a comms officer shouted, "Dwarfs ground forces inbound. They've breached the perimeter." Tash's eyes lit up with renewed fury. Finally, a fight on solid ground. Let's see how these humans fare when they're not hiding behind ships. The dwarfs' drop pods hit the surface like meteors, each one disgorging squads of heavily armored soldiers. They moved swiftly, their compact exosuits enhancing their strength and agility. Plasma rifles spat energy bolts with deadly precision, and advanced shielding absorbed the Empire's return fire. Run and Tash reached the outer trenches as the first wave of dwarfs advanced. The Imperial ground troops were well trained, their numbers overwhelming, but the dwarfs fought with a ferocity that defied their size. Run ducked behind cover, his sidearm trembling in his grip. Beside him, Tash fired wildly, his shouts drowned out by the cacophony of battle. "They're too fast," one soldier shouted before being struck by a plasma bolt. Run risked a glance over the trench. The dwarfs were advancing methodically, their movements precise. It wasn't just brute force, it was strategy. "Fall back to the secondary line," Run ordered. Tash grabbed his arm, his face red with fury. "We don't retreat, we regroup," Run snapped, shaking him off. "Unless you want to die here." Reluctantly, Tash followed as the Imperials pulled back. Near the front lines, an Imperial trooper managed to disable one of the dwarf soldiers with a well-placed grenade. As the smoke cleared, the soldier's visor shattered, revealing a face beneath. "Commander," the trooper shouted, dragging the helmetless figure toward cover. Run and Tash arrived moments later. The captured dwarf was breathing heavily, his face bloody but defiant. He was smaller than most humans, his features hardened by years of training and exposure to harsh conditions. Tash sneered. "So it's true, you're human." The soldier met his gaze, unflinching. "We are, and we're here to show you what that means." Ren leaned closer, his tone softer. "Why now? Humanity has stayed quiet for centuries. Why risk open war with the Empire?" The soldier's lips curled into a faint smile. "Because we're done living in the shadows. You thought we were weak, scattered, but we've been preparing, watching. And now we're ready." Tash raised his weapon, anger flaring. "I'll wipe that smug look off your face." Run stepped between them. "Enough, Colonel. He's a prisoner now. Killing him gains us nothing." The soldier smirked. "You're starting to learn." As the battle raged, it became clear that the Empire's forces were outmatched. One by one, their ships fell, and their ground troops were pushed back. On the bridge of the Invincible Hand, Kor's face was ashen. "Admiral," Malik said quietly, "we need to retreat. If we continue, we'll lose everything." Kor stared at the tactical display, his pride warring with reason. Finally, he nodded. "Order all ships to withdraw. We'll regroup and return with reinforcements." The command was relayed, and the Imperial fleet began its retreat. On the ground, the dwarfs ceased their advance, allowing the battered Empire forces to flee. As the last Imperial ship jumped to hyperspace, Commander Darren stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the remnants of the Empire's fleet disappear. "Send a message to their command," he ordered. "Let them know this was only the beginning." Carver raised an eyebrow. "Do you think they'll come back?" Darren's expression was unreadable. "Without question. And next time, they'll bring everything they have. But so will we." On Terrace, Rin stood amidst the wreckage of the battlefield, his gaze distant. Around him, Imperial medics tended to the wounded, their faces grim. Tash approached, his usual bluster subdued. "You think they'll hit us again?" Tash asked. Rin nodded slowly. "Not just us. They've shown the galaxy what humans are capable of. This is bigger than the Empire now." Tash frowned. "Then what do we do?" Ren's jaw tightened. "We learn from this or we lose everything." The battle was over, but its echoes were only beginning to spread. The Galactic Empire's facade of invincibility had cracked, and the question lingered. How far would humanity go to ensure its place among the stars? The halls of the Imperial Council chamber were cold and silent, a stark contrast to the chaos that had unfolded in the Terrace system. High above the core worlds, the Council convened aboard the Aegis of Sovereignty, a colossal station that served as the heart of Imperial authority. Admiral Selen Kor stood before the Council, his face pale but composed. His uniform bore scorch marks from the battle, a visual testament to his survival, though his expression betrayed no hint of submission. "You lost an entire fleet to a force of lesser ships," Grand Chancellor Hare intoned, his voice a mix of disappointment and disdain. "Explain yourself, Admiral." Kor clenched his fists. "It wasn't their technology alone," he began. "It was their strategy, their discipline. They anticipated studied our every move. They fought like they've been studying us for decades. Are you implying this was a failure of Imperial intelligence? Another counselor interjected. I'm saying this was a failure of our arrogance, Kor replied, his voice steady but laced with frustration. We underestimated them. No, we dismissed them entirely. We assumed that humanity was scattered, primitive. But the dwarfs, as they call themselves, are anything but. They are human, but they've evolved far beyond what we believe possible. The council murmured among themselves, their once unshakable confidence visibly rattled. On board the dwarf's flagship, Commander Darren stood at the viewport, staring into the endless black of space. The battle was won, but his expression was grim. They'll be back, Lieutenant Carver said, stepping beside him. The Empire doesn't take humiliation lightly. Darren nodded. No, they don't. But this was never about just one battle. It's about showing them, and the galaxy, that humanity is no longer a silent bystander. Carver hesitated before asking, do you think we're ready for what comes next? Darren turned to him, his gaze sharp. Readiness doesn't matter anymore. The galaxy knows who we are now. What matters is that we never return to the shadows. As the crew around them celebrated, Darren allowed himself a moment of silence. For all the triumph, he knew that the real war had only just begun. Back on Terrace, the scorched landscape bore the scars of the conflict. Major Kelrin surveyed the ruins from a makeshift command post, the smell of charred metal and scorched earth heavy in the air. Colonel Aaron Tash approached, his usual bluster tempered by exhaustion. You were right, Tash admitted grudgingly. They weren't just another upstart species. They were us. Ren turned to him, his expression unreadable. Maybe that's what makes them so dangerous. Tash frowned. What do you mean? Ren gestured to the wreckage. The Empire has spent centuries conquering and subjugating, assuming that no one could challenge us. But the dwarfs, humans, they've been watching, waiting. They've learned our strengths and our weaknesses. And now, they're using everything we've taught them against us. Tash scoffed. So, what do you propose? Negotiation? Surrender? No, Rin said firmly. I propose we change. Adapt. If we don't, this will only be the beginning of our downfall. In the days following the battle, Imperial analysts combed through what little data had been recovered from the engagement. Reports were sent to every major fleet commander, warning of the dwarfs' capabilities and urging caution in future encounters. In his private quarters aboard the Invincible Hand, Admiral Kor reviewed the intelligence with grim determination. He had failed once, but he would not fail again. A soft chime interrupted his thoughts, and the door slid open to reveal Lieutenant Malik. Sir, Malik said, his tone measured. The Council has approved your request for reinforcements. They're sending the 7th and 9th fleets to bolster our position. Kor nodded. Good, but reinforcements alone won't win the next battle. Malik hesitated. What are you suggesting? Kor leaned forward, his eyes cold. We need to understand them, their technology, their society, their motivations. If they've been watching us, then it's time we watch them. Learn what makes them strong, and exploit it. In the hidden enclave where the dwarfs prepared for the next phase of their resistance, Commander Darren addressed his officers. We've won a battle, he said, his voice carrying across the room. But we've also sent a message to the Empire and every species living under their rule. Humanity is no longer a forgotten name in the annals of history. One of the younger officers, Lieutenant Grill, raised his hand. Do you think others will join us? Darren's expression softened slightly. Perhaps, but we can't rely on hope alone. We must be ready to stand alone if necessary. The room fell silent as his words sank in. As the meeting adjourned, Darren lingered, staring at a holographic map of the galaxy. The Empire's reach was vast, its resources seemingly infinite. But he knew that even the mightiest empire could fall if struck in the right place. They think they understand us, he murmured to himself, but they've only seen the beginning. As the Galactic Empire licked its wounds and the dwarfs fortified their position, whispers of the conflict spread throughout the galaxy. On countless worlds, species under Imperial rule began to wonder if rebellion was possible, if the humans, small, underestimated, and defiant, could stand against the Empire, then perhaps so could they. In the Imperial Council chambers, Grand Chancellor Hare addressed his peers. This was a minor setback, he declared. The Empire remains strong, and these humans will be dealt with accordingly. But even as he spoke, doubt lingered in the air. The Empire's arrogance had been its greatest strength and its greatest weakness. Meanwhile, on a distant world, Darren stood beneath a star-filled sky, his thoughts turning to the battles yet to come. Humanity's survival was no longer in question. The question now was whether they could forge a new future, not just for themselves, but for all those who had suffered under the Empire's reign. In the vastness of space, the seeds of rebellion began to take root.